This is an art collage novel video. I made this series so you guys can experience the story faster. The video will focus on the character's psychology, the images are for illustration purposes only. Yunxiao immediately noticed his abnormality and said in a deep voice, "Did you think of something?" Yuan Gaohan opened his mouth wide and moved it a few times, as if he wanted to close it and make a sound, but other than a few giggle sounds from his throat, no other sound came out. Yunxiao smacked him on the head and said, "Hurry up and tell me." Yuan Gaohan was ruthlessly hit, but he didn't care if it was inappropriate, and said in horror, "I just remembered a piece of information. It was the research material of a peak 9th tier alchemist 10,000 years ago on this primordial astral wind, but it has never been taken seriously because the theory in it is too absurd. Now it seems to be true." "Shut up." Yunxiao cursed angrily. "Can you cut the crap? Just tell me the content." Only then did Yuan Gaohan calm his mind and begin to say, "The peak 9th tier alchemist made an incredible guess about the primordial astral wind, believing that the power of time sealed the astral wind to create artificial true spirits. In other words, the interior of the seal was actually a breeding ground, where one wanted to condense a true spirit through the power of elements. However, we don't know if we succeeded in the end. After the tribe was abandoned, no one cared about the seal and the gales. They evolved on their own and became what they are now. You are saying that this crocodile is a man-made true spirit?" This time, it was Yunxiao's turn to open his mouth and look at the crocodile in horror. It was still swallowing and spitting, but the surrounding gale was almost completely devoured by it. Yuan Gaohan looked at him with a bitter smile and said, "Isn't it incredible? True spirits were born from the purest energy in the world, which meant that they were born and raised by the earth. No one would think that they were man-made. It was for this reason that the material was not valued. If it were not for the senior alchemist's respected status, he would not have kept it in the holy region. Before I came to the ancient barons, I flipped through all the information in order to understand the situation here. At that time, I scoffed at him and thought that the senior was out of his mind. I didn't expect it to be true." Yunxiao was completely speechless as he looked at the crocodile. Does this true spirit have intelligence? After he devours the immemorial astral wind, will he want to devour us? He only felt that the situation was worse than the collapse of the Divine Realm tablet. He was actually facing an existence at the God Realm. Even if he was at his peak in his previous life, he would still be dead. "This crocodile is not at the immortal state," the demonic dragon said in a deep voice. "It's probably because it hasn't been completed yet and was disturbed by you. That's why it's only a half-finished product. He was probably devouring the astral winds wantonly to perfect his body. However, I feel that the Kasaya should be lacking a lot. How can an immortal state be so easy to create? No matter. We'll run when the astral winds are weaker." Yunxiao slowly raised his spirits. He had just taken a large number of medicinal pills and recovered part of his strength, so he was slowly accumulating yuan qi. Even if the crocodile was not an immortal state being, it was at least a 9th grade one since it could breathe in and out astral winds like that. It also had a terrifying elemental body, just like Emu's little green, which could not be suppressed without emperor qi. Yuan Gaohan was also prepared to run. His body flickered, and although his expression was ugly, he gradually calmed down and began to circulate some kind of cultivation technique. Just as the gale became thinner to a certain extent, Yunxiao's body suddenly burst out with a bright lunar divine light as he rushed into the distance. Yuan Gaohan was both shocked and angry, but he also turned into a ray of light and followed behind. At this time, whoever was a step late might end up dead. By the time the crocodile reacted, it would definitely be the unlucky one behind it. Yunxiao had already calculated the degree of the gale's attack. His supreme tyrant body, bright moon divine body, and the broken devil sky armor could withstand it for a while. He gritted his teeth and only needed to rush out of the gale zone for several thousand meters, and he would be safe. Yuan Gaohan, on the other hand, was not confident at all, but he knew that he would definitely die if he stayed here alone. Moreover, he was angry that Yunxiao had run ahead of him, so he roared at him from behind, "Kid, you're too disloyal. You didn't even say hello and just slipped away." Yunxiao laughed. Old Yuan, stop pretending in front of me. What you wanted to use just now was a short-distance teleportation, right? But the range of the astral winds is too large, so you need to accumulate energy and go all out. If I use it, I'll be able to leave this damn place in an instant. Will you remember to inform me then? Yuan Gohan's heart jolted. How did this brat know everything? There were only a few people who knew about his teleportation secret technique. He shouted in anger, of course I'll bring you along. Now that you've made your own decision and ran away, you've disrupted my entire plan. You've harmed both yourself and others. Stop right now and wait for me. Yunxiao could not be bothered to pay attention to him. They were all old foxes, and the words that came out of their mouths could only be used to complain and cause trouble. Yuan Gaohan himself knew this, and he was not slow. In just a few moments, he had caught up with Yunxiao, and the two of them rushed into the area of the chaotic wind almost at the same time. As soon as he stepped into it, he immediately felt the origin power of the wind element, which devoured Yunxiao's bright moon divine light. It had only rushed dozens of meters in before it was almost completely gone. Although the demonic sky armor was severely damaged, it still appeared around his body. When the bright moon divine light was completely devoured, demonic chi automatically rushed out and revolved around him. However, it was still unable to effectively resist the erosion of the astral winds. He could only clench his teeth and rush forward with all his might, hoping to get out of this damn place before his energy ran out. Yuan Gohan's situation was even worse. He could only circulate his mental energy to open up a vacuum around his body, but this kind of consumption was extremely astonishing. Not long after, his body became dazed, and his face was filled with shock. Not good. Run. That thing is coming. The dragon's voice suddenly rang out in his soul. Yunxiao looked in the direction of the voice, and he immediately felt a chill run down his spine. The crocodile seemed to be made of astral wind. At some point, it had stopped breathing astral chi and turned into a hurricane as it flew over. Although the surrounding astral chi was thin, it began to spin under the crocodile's influence, and the resistance suddenly increased, causing Yunxiao and Yuan Gaohan to suffer unspeakable pain. It's over, I'm really dead this time. Master Duan, I'll have to trouble you to follow your Dharmakeya's words one more time and say a few good words to help me escape this calamity. Yunxiao smiled wryly and teased him. He felt the power of the gale increase several times in an instant, and he could not even control his own body, let alone rush out. Duan Yu, who was in the Divine Realm tablet, also sensed the situation outside, and he hurriedly said, "You're the chosen one. You're the incarnation of a cockroach, an undefeatable legend, a great man from heaven, a golden sun, and a peerless handsome man. You'll definitely be able to rush out of the wind gap and escape successfully." As soon as he said that, Yunxiao lost control of his body and was pulled into the tornado created by the crocodile. Yuan Gaohan wasn't any better off, he was also swept up by the hurricane and roared repeatedly, but it was of no use. The entire sky above the ancient barrens turned into a hurricane. It lasted for the time it took to brew a cup of tea before it gradually died down. All the wind collapsed and gathered together, revealing the true body of the crocodile, which stayed in the sky. The gator opened his eyes, revealing his bloodshot eyes. He opened his mouth and exhaled, immediately shooting out an overbearing astral wind power. His 4 legs slowly crawled in the air, and he descended to the ruins. The entire night sky returned to its clear state, and there was no longer any wind. At this moment, the 3 bright stars Feng Lang, the Jade Man, and the large dog finally spread out in a straight line and began to move in their respective trajectories. The crocodile opened its eyes and crawled on the ruins for a while. Then, it closed its eyes again and fell asleep on the ground. And the places he had crawled past had all turned into fossils, slowly turning into powder. After being sucked into the tornado, Yunxiao poured all his primordial chi into the demonic sky armor, hoping to survive for a while longer. Just as he could no longer hold on and was filled with despair, the power of the astral winds suddenly disappeared. He directly fell from the sky. What's going on? The sky was gray, and the world couldn't be seen clearly. Yunxiao let it fall. He had used up all his strength to resist the attack of the gale earlier, so he could not gather any yuan qi at all. Not long after, another ray of light fell down like him. It was Yuan Gaohan, who seemed to have lost his strength and was unable to fly. Just like that, the two of them fell straight down. After an unknown period of time, they finally landed. With a boom, they crashed into the ground, creating two huge pits and filling the sky with yellow sand. This place was actually a desert. Pay. Yunxiao spat out the sand in his mouth with all his might, and his whole body was submerged in it. With great difficulty, he managed to squeeze his head out of the ground, but he felt weak all over and fell asleep in a daze. He didn't know how much time had passed before he woke up. The scene in front of him was still gray, and he was indeed in a barren land. Not far away, there was a glimmer of light on the ground. He looked over and saw that it was Yuan Gaohan. Yuan Gaohan was different from him. He was a spirit, and if he couldn't continue to absorb external power, he would be unable to recover his strength on his own, which meant that he would only become weaker and weaker. In this gray mist, there was not even light, much less vital qi. Yunxiao had also used up all his medicinal pills earlier, and now he was staggering forward on his own. When he came to Yuan Gaohan's side, he found that the man was in an extremely bad condition, and could dissipate at any time. "Hey, brother Yuan, are you alright?" Yunxiao went up and kicked him a few times, but when he saw no reaction, he muttered to himself, "He's most likely dead. Since that's the case, we can't let it go to waste. Let's just absorb it into my soul-devouring banner." Swish! Yuan Gaohan's body bounced up from the ground in an instant, and he stared at Yunxiao with an angry face as he roared, "You damn bastard, you actually still want to take me in?" Yuan Gaohan's face was filled with fear and anger, his eyes spewing fire and the light on his body flickering non-stop. It was indeed a sign of great exhaustion, but when he heard that he was going to be captured, he woke up from fright. "A man's potential is infinite," Yunxiao said with a smile. "It can't be stimulated without some pressure. I'm just afraid that you'll just disappear like smoke." Yuan Gaohan's face was cold. How could he believe him? Still vigilantly looking at the soul-devouring flag in his hand, he coldly snorted, "Get away from me." Yunxiao smiled as he spun the soul-devouring banner a few times in his hand and put it away. The soul body was too afraid of the soul-devourer race. He looked around gloomily and said, "Old Yuan, let's work together to find a way to leave this damn place. Look where we are." Only then did Yuan Gaohan look around, and his expression suddenly changed as he cried out, "An independent space?" Yunxiao nodded and said, "It should be an independent space, but I don't know where it is. There's no yuan qi, and there's no moon or stars. It should be a closed independent space." Yuan Gaohan's expression turned ugly. Unless one had the power of a martial emperor that could shatter the void, it would be very difficult to get out of this space. If there was the power of starlight, it would still be fine. He would not mind and could cultivate here in peace. When he broke through to the 9th rank soul power, he would naturally be able to break through the air and leave. However, the entire sky was dark and lightless. Not to mention starlight, there was not even a bit of vital energy in it. It's a little strange. There's no yuan qi in the air at all. Even if it's a dead space, it shouldn't have dissipated so cleanly. Moreover, we were teleported here by the astral winds, so there's obviously an entrance. Yunxiao was puzzled, so he immediately told Yuan Gaohan what he was thinking. Yuan Gaohan was also stunned for a moment, but he felt that it made a lot of sense. The two of them pondered for a long time but still couldn't come up with a reason. In the end, Yunxiao said, "Let's go ahead and take a look. When we came in earlier, we didn't feel like we were traveling through space. It seems to be connected to the ancient primordial land." Yuan Gaohan suddenly thought of a possibility and said in horror, "Do you think this place is in the time rule that seals the immemorial astral wind?" Yunxiao shook his head with a smile. "No, I'm not, absolutely not." Seeing Yuan Gaohan's puzzled expression, he smiled and explained, "This is a desert. Look at this sand, there are no traces of the strong wind sweeping it. It seems to have been silent for thousands of years. If the immemorial astral winds have always been sealed here, there will definitely be traces on the sand surface. Yuan Gaohan heaved a sigh of relief. If he was sealed by the time law, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he broke through to the ninefold soul body. Yunxiao took out a Tiger King chariot, and the two of them boarded it. Then, they turned into a beam of light and flew through the space. Tens of thousands of miles of yellow sand, dark and gloomy, with no end in sight, no exit or hope could be seen. The atmosphere on the Tiger King chariot was getting heavier and heavier. Both of them had gloomy faces. After flying for several hours, the scenery was still the same. Only the person who created the independent space would know what was going on inside. God knew how vast it was. Moreover, some living independent spaces would continue to expand after losing control and eventually develop into an independent realm, which was boundless. Hey, this independent space can't be boundless, right? Yuan Gaohan finally couldn't help but ask. As a ninth-tier alchemist, Yunxiao should be the one asking him, but he found that Yunxiao seemed to be more patient than him, so he could not help but speak first. Yunxiao's face was dark and expressionless. He did not say a word. Hey, I'm asking you. Yuan Gaohan pushed his palm over and angrily said, can't you show some respect to your senior? Only then did Yunxiao turn his face around and say with a very unsightly expression, we might really be done for. This place should be an illusion that goes around in circles. Without the strength of a martial supreme, there's no way out. Why do they all like to do this? He had just come up from the demon's land, and in the reflection of the moon and the mirror, he was constantly spinning in circles. An illusion? Yuan Gaohan's heart suddenly jumped, and he seemed to have thought of this possibility. His eyes focused down and began to observe his surroundings. However, it was all yellow sand without any reference. He couldn't see anything at all. If it's an illusion, there's no way I can't sense it with my 8th-tier starlight soul body, he said in a deep voice. Yunxiao stopped the Tiger King chariot and landed it on the yellow sand. Only then did he walk out of the chariot, look up at the dark sky, and say in a serious voice, it can only mean that the person who set up the formation is extremely skilled. However, this is only my speculation, and it is the best speculation. The worst-case scenario was, of course, that the independent space would expand infinitely. If it's an illusion, there's still a chance to break it. If it's an infinitely expanding space, then it's really over. Yuan Gaohan also understood this principle, and with a heavy expression, he walked over to the Tiger King chariot, sat down cross-legged, and began to use some kind of spell, causing golden light to dance around him like butterflies. He did not have a source of energy to replenish his energy, and every time he cast a spell, he would suffer a huge loss. However, he had no way out, and it would be worse if he stayed stagnant for a long time. Yunxiao did not disturb him. He knew that it was a very powerful soul art, which allowed the soul to integrate into the surrounding environment and sense all the laws and forces of heaven and earth. The most taboo thing was to be disturbed. Soon, Yuan Gaohan slowly opened his eyes and said, sure enough, there is indeed a formation here. I can feel the evil qi in the surroundings. This yellow sand seems to be an illusion. Can you break it? Yunxiao asked. Yuan Gaohan's soul power was far above his, and if even Yuan Gaohan couldn't do anything, then he had even less hope. Yuan Gaohan glanced at him and said, that formation has been around for thousands of years and is already damaged beyond repair, but it still makes me palpitate. I can't do it alone, I need your help. Help you? Yunxiao asked suspiciously. I'll help you? Big brother, you have an 8th-level starlight soul body. I can't even get close to you when it comes to breaking the formation. Yuan Gaohan said, you've also seen it. My soul power has not reached the 8th level at all. Did you just take the Tianshui soul-nourishing pill? Yunxiao rolled his eyes at him and snorted coldly, your eyes are quite sharp. It's a pity that you only have one. Yuan Gaohan frowned and said, that's troublesome, unless it's Qianqian. He became a little hesitant, as if it was inconvenient. Just tell me what you have to say, Yunxiao said. At a time like this, unless you want me to pick up the soap, I'll agree to anything you say. Yuan Gaohan shivered and felt a chill down his spine. He looked at him with fear, then revealed a solemn expression and said with some difficulty, "Unless you use the golden soul slave and the soul-devouring flag to cooperate with me. However, if you do that, your golden soul slave might be severely injured or even disappear." The soul slaves were the core of the soul devourer race's disciples. Basically, they would live with the soul slave, and they would die with the soul slave. If they were to offer their soul slaves, it would be no different from killing them. Therefore, when Yuan Gaohan said these words, he was very nervous, afraid that Yunxiao would instantly fall out with him. As expected, Yunxiao's face turned cold as he said in a cold voice, "Do you know how important the soul-devouring banner is to me?" Yuan Gaohan felt the chill from his body and immediately said awkwardly, "Of course I know, but at this time, if we don't try, we'll all die." Yunxiao's face was cold as he said resolutely, "Losing the soul-devouring banner is worse than death." Yuan Gaohan's eyes flashed with disappointment. Although this result was disappointing, it was not unexpected. He bitterly said, "In this case, if we can't open this illusory formation, we can only wait for death." However, Yunxiao's expression eased a little, and he said with a pained look, "But I can't just wait for death like this. As a 9th-tier alchemist of the Holy Region, if you can compensate me a little, I'm willing to offer you the soul-devouring banner. After all, I can still clearly distinguish which is more important and which is less important." Yuan Gaohan was stunned for a moment before he immediately rejoiced, "As long as we can take out the soul-devouring banner, we can escape from here. Just tell us what you want." "Really?" Yunxiao looked at him and asked. Just as Yuan Gaohan was about to agree, he suddenly remembered that this person in front of him didn't seem to be so simple and immediately stopped his impulse, frowning, "Tell me what you want first." Yunxiao put on a pure smile and said, "Losing the soul-devouring flag is almost impossible to make up for my loss, especially when it's a golden soul slave. You should be clear about the relationship between the two. So any compensation to me is like a cup of water in a burning cart, right?" Yuan Gaohan frowned and nodded slightly, apparently agreeing with his statement. "And?" Yunxiao took a deep breath and sighed. "And even though we haven't known each other for long, you have some misunderstandings about me. Even if I escape from here, I don't dare to go to the Holy Region with you to ask for compensation. If I don't, my losses might be even greater, don't you think so?" Yuan Gaohan snorted coldly and said, "What do you mean by misunderstanding? You're such a coward." Yunxiao waved his hand and interrupted him, all right. It's hard to clear up the misunderstanding in a few words. Anyway, that's the situation. I can't just take out the soul-devouring banner for nothing. How about this, you can exchange 100 or so ancient scriptures for it." "An ancient scripture? 100 of them?" Yuan Gaohan sucked in a breath of cold air, his expression changing greatly as he angrily said, "What do you think that ancient scripture is? Do you think it's a street full of erotic novels? You can write a few hundred to 1,000 words." "Oh, yeah, how much do you want?" Yunxiao wiped his nose and said in embarrassment, "I've even offered my golden soul slave. You're just explaining a few scriptures, so you won't lose anything. Think about who's at a disadvantage and who's at a disadvantage. Otherwise, forget it. When your 8th tier starlight soul body dissipates, can your true body return to the 9th tier with a few ancient characters? Can you still stabilize your peak?" Yuan Gaohan's face darkened instantly. Yunxiao's words had hit his soft spot. The other party was just a small fry of the Soul Devourer clan. His death was not a big deal. But he was different. He was a 9th tier alchemist of the Holy Realm, so how could he die so easily?